welcome to the show today. Welcome to the stream. I'm Josh Rushing. I'm sitting in for Femi OK. And today we're talking about global vaccine inequality. I'm going to show you a chart from my laptop to give you a real sense of the story here. This will do it pretty quickly. You can look at North America. This is for people who are the share of people who have received at least one dose of COVID vaccine by May 10th. So in North America, you're looking about a third of the population. In Europe, a quarter of the population. South America, 13%. And then here's where our story is going to rest today. In Asia at 4.6% and Africa at 1.1%. Now, before we jump into it, I want to show you another thing. We're going to go to YouTube. Check this out. We're live on YouTube at this moment. And see that chat over there on the right? We have a live producer waiting to get your comments to me so I can share them in the show. And in fact, we'll start with one. Here's one from Sudarshan Tarade. Let me say it loud. Millions of people will die if you don't waive the patents. So basically making the argument that the patents is a bottleneck stopping people from getting the vaccine. We'll see if that's the case or not today. If you look at the world right now and what's happening with COVID-19, it is raging in India, where there's 22 million cases. They're approaching 250,000 dead. Southern India has gone on full lockdown, but the rest of the country is yet to go on full lockdown. We're going to discuss what's happening with the vaccines in India and where COVID hasn't really hit hard yet, and that's in sub-Saharan Africa, and they're screaming for the vaccines there, but they cannot get to the head of line, and that's going to come up in today's discussion as well. In fact, let me go ahead and bring in our guests who are joining us all the way from London to Bangalore. We'll begin with Ayodi. Can you introduce yourself?
Hi, my name's Dr. Ayodi Alakija. I'm the co-chair of the Africa Union Vaccine Delivery Alliance. Thank you very much for having me.
Yodi, thank you for joining us from London. Going to Krishna, you're joining us from Duke University. Can you tell us a bit about yourself?
Hi, I'm Krishna Aldaikumar. I'm a doctor, and I serve as the director of the Duke Global Health Innovation Center, where we're trying to study and to advocate for stronger global access and equity for vaccines.
Global stronger access and equity for vaccines. We should put up front that your center does receive funding from pharmaceutical companies in the U.S., is that right?
It does. We work with the public and the private sector, including firms in the pharmaceutical sector, the Gates Foundation, the U.S. government.
Do you receive funding from Moderna, Pfizer, Johnson & Johnson?
We receive funding from AstraZeneca and from Pfizer and the Pfizer Foundation, but we don't do any work that's related to their vaccine development or rollout.
Okay, great. Thank you, Krishna. And Achal, can you tell us a bit about yourself?
Sure, I'm Achal Prabhala. I live in Bangalore, but I coordinate a project called Access IPSA, which works for access to medicines in India, Brazil, and South Africa. And I've been doing this actually for 18 years, and then ever since the start of the pandemic, I've been working on increasing access to coronavirus vaccines.
Well, give us a sense of what it's like in India right now. Is Bangalore on full lockdown?
So 500 meters from my house, we actually have a contingent of the military police who are standing guard at an intersection where traffic usually passes, which now doesn't because there isn't any traffic. We're on full lockdown. We've actually been on a full lockdown for the last 2 weeks, and we will be in lockdown indefinitely. And that's because actually Bangalore has now the highest caseload in the country. It is actually pure and utter hell.
And what's your access to vaccines like there?
Well, personally, I could give you an example from last week. I had to find a second dose for my parents who had taken the first dose of their AstraZeneca vaccine about 8 weeks ago. I spent 8 hours on the road, on the phone, with a range of different hospitals, public health centers, to find a center that would allow my 87-year-old father and my 72-year-old mother to get their second dose in a situation where they wouldn't have to wait for more than 2 or 3 hours. In the event, we found one at 4 p.m. in the evening after trying all morning, and they waited 2 hours, and they came home at about 7 o'clock, vaccinated with their second dose last week.
I'm going to bring in our Twitter audience here. We have a tweet from Moshin Babur, who says that this is a response to the stream tweeted out. Are you worried about COVID vaccine inequality in your country? And Moshin says this is specifically true for India, which is hardest hit. For vaccination needs to be enrolled in an app, which most Indians don't have access to. It's a model which is most discriminatory and biased against the less privileged and rural Indians. Was your family enrolled in the app?
You know, this is a hilarious story, but I have a love-hate relationship with the Indian government, which over the last 7 years has been actually purely hate. And that hate has recently extended to the app that they created called CoWIN. For my parents' first dose, I spent a grand total of about 48 hours, maybe constantly on this app to get them a vaccine appointment at an appointed time when I was assured that there wouldn't be huge crowds. And of course, my parents foolishly went at that appointed time to the hospital to be told, are you mad? Because, of course, we gave out all our vaccine doses at 9 a.m. in the morning to the first people who came here to get vaccines. This app doesn't work. And so, of course, the next day, my parents went back at 9 a.m. in the morning without registering on any app whatsoever to get their vaccine and got it like everybody else is doing, regardless of the somewhat astonishing technological advances our government is putting out. So it's an incredible mess. In fact, there are actually software hackers who are now working on the new version of the app to set up scripts that run in the background over 48 hours to find an appointment for them. Because what India has done is we've opened up vaccinations to 945 million people. This is everybody above the age of 18, with a stock of vaccines that are in the region of about 100 million, right? So just imagine this. You've opened up vaccinations to the extent of needing about 1.9 billion doses of vaccines with about 100 million doses on hand. Cue the confusion. That is what we're living.
All right, let's.
This is the whole issue around vaccine equity that you are so clearly bringing out here. Sorry, Josh, to jump in at that moment.
No,
I mean,
please
this is
do,
what
Yodi.
we're talking about in Africa. We're talking about the fact that it is ridiculous that parts of the world have no vaccines, that, you have 87-year-olds who are waiting 8 hours in line to try to get a vaccine. And there's some parts of the world that are literally either hoarding them or are standing in line and are blocking places in line. India, of course, produces vaccines, and this is a combination of factors. But in Africa, India has seen 4.1% vaccinated. And, you're hearing now that there's 100 million doses and 900 odd million people waiting in line. Vaccine equity is the issue of our time. We're not going to end this pandemic until, Acha's parents can get vaccinated, until, my uncles and aunties and other people can get vaccinated in Africa. We have a global crisis on our hands, and you're listening to somebody from a vaccine producing nation. I mean, it is just, I'm so sorry for what you're going through in India. I'm so sorry. My heart breaks. It keeps me awake at night when I see these images of literally funeral pyres that literally signify a world on fire with a virus. It is inhumane that the world and world leaders wouldn't be jumping to attention to do everything they can in this moment to ensure that we have vaccines to everybody who needs them as quickly as possible in as equitable a manner as possible.
Krishna, President Biden last week supported the idea of temporarily opening up the patents. Would that help? Would that get more vaccines to more people?
Yeah, first, my heart goes out to people in India and lots of different parts of the world that are really suffering at the moment. And we do absolutely, as has been said, need to worry about equity as the guiding principle by which we think about allocating, distributing, and administering vaccines around the world. We need to think about this from different time horizons. In the short term, what we need to do today is make sure that the doses that are coming off the production lines are distributed in a much more equitable manner. It can't be that they almost all go to high-income countries and we have to wait for some of them to be donated in a charity model to get to low and middle income countries. We have to figure out how to make that work better. Secondly, we've got to figure out how to get rid of the barriers we have to ramp up manufacturing production as much as we possibly can over the next 3 to 6 months. That means looking at every facility we have now, bringing up new production lines, getting rid of barriers like raw ingredients and materials, and seeing if we can get more doses manufactured. And then third, we have to get to a more distributed model of vaccine manufacturing globally. India has traditionally been the workhorse of manufacturing, and we saw that that model isn't fit for purpose in the midst of a pandemic. Right now, India is manufacturing 70 to 80 million doses of vaccine a month, which isn't enough just to meet domestic needs, much less the needs of the rest of the world. So we've got to look at other parts of Asia, Africa, Latin America especially, to invest now in building up capacity, even if it takes 6 to 12 to 18 months to come online. My worry about the IP waivers is that right now it's a distraction. In the long term, I think it's a positive indication that the U.S. is taking this very seriously, wants to play a leadership role, and is willing to invest and partner with others around the world. Unfortunately, an IP waiver, even if granted today, wouldn't increase the amount of money and wouldn't increase the number of doses in the next 3 to 6 months. That doesn't mean we shouldn't do it. I just hope we don't get distracted by that and forget to do all the other urgent things that are still needed.
Yeah, Yodi, jump in, and then Achal
Absolutely.
next.
Yeah. Sorry, I mean, I have to say, absolutely disagree that vaccine waivers are a distraction right now. I think the distraction is trying to move us away from vaccine waivers, because what vaccine waivers do in this moment is that it shows that we're grabbing the opportunity within this crisis with both hands. We are at a disadvantage in the low and middle income countries of the world because, for instance, let me use Africa. We use 25% of the world's vaccines produced globally in any given year. We produce 1% of those vaccines. 99% we import. We have seen that when a crisis like this comes, you said that the vaccine manufacturing is not fit for purpose. I would argue that the entire global health infrastructure that we have at the moment is shown not to be fit for purpose. It isn't just delivering for you in the US, it isn't delivering for the UK, it isn't delivering for India, and it isn't delivering for Africa. Yes, it is not a quick fix. Waivers are not a quick fix in this moment right now. But waivers, if we get them in place and if we get the technology transfer and we get the know-how put in place, then what it will show is that this virus isn't going away. We've got another year, sadly, another 2 years perhaps. So we can prepare. It's about preparedness. It's about being ready for that next thing that is coming our way. So I disagree that vaccines are waivers are a distraction. I think they are absolutely critical. And I think the signal that has been made by the US is very welcome. And we call for the rest of the world to do the same. Ajahn, over to you.
I want to make two brief points here. And the first is that about a month ago, a colleague of mine, Leela Menghani, who heads MSF's operations in India, and I wrote a piece in The Guardian about the way in which the Indian crisis was affecting the rest of the poor world. So 92 countries in the world, about half the world's population, depends upon vaccines that are produced at one company in one country, the Serum Institute in India. Now, those vaccines we're treating as India's vaccines, but they were never India's vaccines. They were contracted up to 50 to 60% of those vaccines to go to countries like Nigeria, who instead of getting the doses that they were contracted to receive and promised to receive last year, received roughly enough to vaccinate a little less than 1% of their populations. This is countries like Ghana, countries like Nigeria, and if they were lucky to get any vaccine doses at all from the COVAX facility, which is this consortium run by the World Health Organization and Gavi and CEPI. Now, this is a huge letdown. There are countries, other countries like Pakistan, who didn't get any doses, by the way. So the Indian crisis, where we are essentially usurping vaccines that were not meant for us to be used for us, is creating this situation where it's not satisfying the Indian need, and it is letting down the other countries who have even less vaccines than us and who depended on this supply in order to get through this crisis, right? But the second quick point that I want to make is that the vaccine patent waiver that Biden has signaled his support for is the start of a marathon. The vaccine recipe needs to be shared with the world. We need to create as many opportunities for people to produce these vaccines as possible because we need them in the billions. Now, the recipe consists of two ingredients. The first ingredient are the legal rights to make the vaccine. Those are the patents that we're trying to have waived. Now, Krishna's also right in saying that it's not all the way because the second ingredient is the technology. Think of it as a manual to make the vaccine, right? That needs to be shared as well. So we now need to put pressure both to complete the TRIPS waiver process as well as to get the second ingredient coming to us, which is the manual to make these vaccines. So it's absolutely a step in the right direction, but I caution it's the first step in a marathon. And we don't have time to run a marathon.
I want to bring in someone from our community here. Derek Lowe is a drug discovery researcher, and he sent us this video comment.
I think it's crucial that we vaccinate as much of the world as possible, as quickly as we can. But I don't think that patents are really the bottleneck. Moderna has opened up theirs, and there haven't been any takers yet. That's because the real bottlenecks are expertise, supplies of key ingredients, a lot of technology that's very hard to replicate if you haven't done it yourself. So it's already scaling up in North America, in Europe, in India, in China. I think that's the place to put the effort, in the biggest scale factories, which are already being enlisted.
So, Achal, Derek says that patents aren't the bottleneck. Jump in here for us.
Yeah, I really have to do this because it's like I'm bursting with information to give you. Yeah. So this is something that's been repeated, and you'll hear this a lot. If you open up Foreign Affairs, you'll see an article today on this. If you open up the Wall Street Journal, you'll see an article by a board member of Pfizer saying this is vaccines are complex. Now, this is the sort of phrase that is now giving me hives. Actually, I mean, it literally makes me break out into hives, right? Absolutely. And so I apologize for being so excited, but I'm in the middle of hell, and I really, it's become so personal now that I can't be rational about this. But let me just give you this example. So Moderna said that they would not enforce their patents on their vaccine during the pandemic. But guess what? Moderna doesn't actually own all their patents. So one of the patents in the Moderna vaccine is owned by the National Institutes of Health.
NIH.
It hasn't even licensed it by the NIH in the United States. Another patent was developed at the University of Pennsylvania, licensed to a biotech company who then further licensed it to Moderna and to Pfizer. Moderna cannot give away its patents even if it wanted to. I'm sorry to say. So the only way that this is possible is by a blanket waiver that suspends pharmaceutical monopolies in intellectual property in the pandemic in order to get that clutch of intellectual property rights around this vaccine. Otherwise, you're going to go one by one, case by case, and my God, if you tried that the legal way, you would be spending the next couple of years trying to untangle that mess, right? It is absurd. But the second point I want to make is that Derek Lowe is talking about the mRNA technology, which is a revolutionary platform that Pfizer and Moderna use with great success. It's had great results so far. But you know what the interesting thing about it is? Their story is that because it's a new technology, it's more complex and no one can make it. I've been in conversation, and we wrote a piece about this in The Atlantic last week with my colleague Chelsea Clinton, where we talked about the capacity that exists. The mRNA vaccines do not use biology. They don't grow viruses. So because they're a chemical process, guess what? They're easier to make. And because of that, guess what? There are potentially 250 plus companies in India who make injectable pharmaceuticals, who have manufacturing units that are perfectly capable of attempting to make an mRNA vaccine and possibly succeeding. No one's ever done it before, but this is what there is.
So we have a couple of comments. Okay, I'm going to get Krishna. We haven't heard from you in a while. So Krishna, you go, and then I'm going to bring in some of our YouTube comments. Go for it, Krishna.
Sure. I think we should separate sort of means from end, right? So absolutely, we need to get to a place where we have sustainable capacity in every part of the world to manufacture vaccines, without a doubt. The means to get there, I'm saying, can't be one or the other, right? If to pursue an IP waiver is, I think, a perfectly reasonable strategy, but it does not solve our problems in the next 6 or 9 or 12 months. What we also have to do in the meantime is to make sure that the doses that are rolling off the production lines now get distributed more equitably. And we have to be able to ramp up short-term manufacturing in the current facilities that are able to ramp up, which means solving all the supply chain challenges. And we have to figure out, and I personally think that a accelerated way to building that capacity is through voluntary transfer of technology, of licenses, of capacity, build the human capital so that it does become sustainable, and figure out how we can keep it financially sustainable so that we don't just ramp it all up and have to ramp it all back down in the next 2 or 3 years. So I think we all want to achieve the same ends, and the IP waiver is certainly a signal of political will, but it doesn't actually get us closer today.
Yodi, I have a couple of YouTube comments I'm going to throw your way so you can respond to them. One's from Anton, says, we shouldn't blame governments for thinking about their citizens first. And the second is from Grave Peril. Why should the patents be lifted? What stops anyone from inventing their own vaccine?
Well, those are interesting comments. The first one about not blaming governments. Nobody's saying that governments shouldn't think about their own citizens first. But what we're saying is that it is the enlightened self-interest of all global citizens and indeed all governments of the world to ensure that this virus is stopped in all countries. Because as Acha is just telling us about the living hell that he's going through in India, those variants, the B1617 variant that was first identified in India, was identified yesterday by WHO, named as a variant of concern. What does that mean? It is more transmissible. It is potentially mildly antibody evasive. I don't want to create any panic by saying too much of that at the moment, but small studies are showing that there are problems with this variant. It is why there is such a raging fire right now. If we don't stop it across the world, it marches on. So it is self-defeating to end COVID in the US or in the UK, because it will just come back again. It will come back stronger. It will come back with different variants. I mean, this is the layman's explanation of why governments need to think of the whole world. And then why can't people just invent their own? That is also, I mean, yes, fine. We're all about innovation and creativity. But the issue here is that we're in a global pandemic. You know, this is a once in a 100-year event, which demands a once in a 100-year level of global cooperation and solidarity. Nobody was expecting this. Nobody was waiting for this. And plus, people didn't just invent their own. Governments, the government of the UK, the government of Germany, the government of the US, put a lot of money, and other countries put a lot of money into the research and development of these vaccines. So someone didn't just wake up, go into their kitchen and use a recipe analogy, you know, throw a few things together and go, woo, I've got a great vaccine. No, this has been years in the making with a lot of investment. Therefore, there is a global good and a real argument to be made that if we don't stop it all over the world, we are all in peril. And the world right now is in a perilous state.
I want to ask you about Africa and what's happening, particularly in sub-Saharan Africa. It seems as if COVID has not surged there yet, but I've heard it's a matter of when, not if. Is that the case? And what is the access to vaccines in those countries?
I think as far as Africa goes, I would hesitate to say that COVID has not hit yet. I think this is what we were saying about India just a few months ago. I think there's been a lack of data. We don't know. I've been quoted as saying it's a hidden pandemic. We don't know exactly what's going on. You know, we have a lack of diagnostics, so we don't have the testing that is available in many countries. You hear of pockets of people dying, pockets of people sick, and so I mean I think it's seeding at the moment, and I'm very, very concerned, in fact terrified, that we're awaiting the India scenario. We're hearing reports now from the Seychelles of really serious outbreaks, even though they actually have had quite a few vaccinations. We're hearing reports from Sudan of health systems beginning to collapse and people, you know, desperately searching for oxygen. So that is beginning to show you, those are the indicators that are showing you that Africa is creeping up to where India is. Now, a quick point of data, India, and you know, I stand to be corrected, has vaccinated about 200 million plus people out of about 1.4 billion population. Africa has vaccinated less than about 18 million people for 1.2 billion population. So that shows you where we are and where we stand in terms of who has vaccines and who doesn't, and where the need is. Right now, there are no vaccines in view for Africa for the next few months. I can say that without fear of contradiction, because India needs to look after her own citizens, yes. And of course, they have a fire burning, and you have to put out your own fire before you go off, obviously, and try and put out others. But where are the rich countries of the world who are hoarding vaccines? Where are the UKs and the US and the EU is doing quite a bit of their fair share? We need exactly what Krishna said. We need the rich countries of the world who have vaccines to share, and to share vaccines now. It is not a waiver or sharing issue. It is a both issue.
I'm going to give you the last 30 seconds from Bangalore to the world. What do you have to say?
To pick up what Yodi said and to pick up what Krishna said, look, we need the US to act immediately. The short-term solution, give us the doses you don't want. You don't like AstraZeneca, give it to us. We'll take it, right? The long-term solution, fund factories. Near-term solution, force companies you funded to share their technology with manufacturers who can pick it up and use it. You know, this is not funny any longer. This is sick. What's happening in India is waiting to happen to every unvaccinated society, whether it's in sub-Saharan Africa or Southeast Asia. And if we don't act, we have to explain that to our children and our grandchildren. And I'd love to see what they have to say.
That's it. That's it for today. Thank you so much. We'll see you next time on The Stream.